Kilbin is the name, and Artifact is the game. That's right. If you haven't heard of Artifact, this is the new card game that will be coming out from Valve, the creators of things like Dota 2, Half-Life. Of course, they run Steam, the biggest gaming platform in the world, and they teased Artifact a long time ago. But as of right now, we finally have some details on what Artifact is all about. And I'm super excited about this game because I think it might be the very first card game coming out that actually has a chance to be competitive with Hearthstone, because the production values, the art quality, the gameplay mechanics all look like things that are going to be absolutely top-notch. There's a good chance Artifact could be maybe the #1 new card game for PC players. Now, I'm never going to give up on Hearthstone, but Artifact might be something I play, and I've been looking for details on this game basically forever. Valve has been incredibly tight-lipped, but finally, they brought in some journalists. We finally got screenshots. We know what the gameplay's about. We understand the overall system of how Artifact is going to work, and I wanted to break that down for you guys. So I've scoured the internet for the last day or so as a lot of these details have come out, and in this video I'm going to walk you through exactly what Artifact is all about, everything we know so far about Artifact. Now that said, of course, I wasn't there firsthand. This is all secondhand information. The game is not still going to be out for a while. It's not planned to hit public until apparently mid to late 2018, so a lot of this stuff is still up for change. It could be completely different when we actually see it live in the game for the very first time. So this is not necessarily going to be 100% accurate, but it is going to show you everything so far that has been revealed about Artifact. All that said, let's take our very first look at Artifact. I couldn't be more excited. So there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Artifact as far as the overall game system is concerned. I'm going to get into that later in the video. What I really want to start with first is the game itself. What does this look like when you're playing Artifact? And if you're familiar with things like Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone, there's going to be a lot of familiar elements. You're playing cards onto a board, you're interacting with your opponent's cards in some levels, and you're trying to kill your opponent's health total. Now, the one big distinction about Artifact so far that some other games have sort of toyed with is that there are 3 lanes or 3 boards in Artifact that you're sort of playing simultaneously in the course of a game. Now, of course, turns pass regularly, it sounds like, from one board to the next, but you have to maintain your resources across all 3 of these boards independently, and each board essentially has a health total, which is your opponent's tower that you're trying to take down. And each of those towers starts the game at 40 health. And your win condition is 2 different things you can accomplish. You can take down 2 of your opponent's towers, therefore sort of winning 2 boards, almost like you would in a regular Hearthstone game, taking your opponent down to 30. You'd have to do that twice. Alternatively, once you take a tower down, it gets replaced with something called an Ancient, which you might be familiar with if you play some Dota. Defense of the Ancients, for instance. And that Ancient has 80 health. So if you take down a single Ancient, you can also win the game. Now that means that if you take down 2 boards, you'd have to kill essentially 80 health. If you take down a tower and an Ancient, that'd be 120 health. So it might be a little bit harder to kill an Ancient, but I can imagine some deck strategies or styles, of course, that emphasize overpowering a single lane and just swarming down that Ancient as a win condition as well. Now, beyond that, there are actually 2 different sort of resource systems that we've seen in the game thus far. Those are first and foremost a sort of mana cost, like we've seen traditionally, that does ramp up by 1 over time, and each lane has its own independent mana cost. Now, I think they all stay the same unless there's some sort of mana manipulation that will happen, but you spend mana in each lane uniquely. They don't move from one to another. You don't have a total mana pool. Each lane is going to only have that strict limited resource starting something like 3 to 4 to 5, etc. And then on top of that, there's also a gold resource. And this is something that you would accrue by killing your opponent's cards, essentially. Now, we'll get into the card types a little bit here in a second, but as you essentially kill your opponent's cards, you gain either 1 or 5 gold in increments, and then you can spend that gold in what is a shop, essentially, and that's something that comes up at the end of each full 3-board turn cycle, and it allows you to buy items, and then those items can be used to modify your cards. So you can think of them as like sort of weapons or armor or, you know, accessories that buff your hero characters or your prominent cards on the board. So you're going to have to manage both mana, board states, multiple boards. You're going to have to use your gold in sensible and smart ways and understand when to hold and when to utilize those resources. So you pool up 15 gold to get something amazing. Do you spend 5 gold really quickly to gain a fast advantage? Do you use all your mana in one board versus save it in another because you're trying to balance which board you're focusing or defending in. There's like a million different interactions that I think are going to have to be considered in every single game, and you can really quickly see, just breaking down the core mechanics, how this is going to be such a complex and highly interactive style of card game. That's going to require a lot more focus, a lot more strategy, and frankly a lot more skill. So you can see how this could be sort of skill rewarding card game, a complex, advanced card game, much like Dota is to MOBAs. It sounds like Artifact will be to card games as well. So now let's talk about the individual cards that are going to be played onto the actual board. So it sounds like each player is going to start with 5 hero cards, they're called, much like you play 5 heroes in a game of Dota or the traditional MOBA style. And each of these hero cards is going to look a bit like a minion in Hearthstone, but it's going to have pretty high health totals. So, you know, you can see here, this one has, for instance, 8 attack and 6 health. That's a pretty big minion, it looks like, or big hero, I should say, in this specific context. And it has some sort of passive effect that's going to be affecting the board. Here you can see Sora Lacan deals +4 damage when attacking a tower. So if she gets through all minions, it sounds like she's going to be able to siege down your opponent's stuff pretty quickly. A big benefit to attacking your heroes, or the opponent's health total, for instance. Now, beyond hero cards, which are played passively in lanes at the beginning of the game and can be replayed anytime they die, it sounds like after a 1-turn delay, you've also got Creep, which in MOBAs, of course, are just the little NPC characters that run down a lane and you have to push through to gain gold and sort of maintain your lane presence. Now, Creep are going to spawn 2 per lane each turn, and they're just sort of default little passive dudes that your heroes and your own creep will have to push through to accrue gold and, of course, to make space to attack your opponent's hero. Because essentially in Artifact, every single minion has taunt, if you're familiar with Hearthstone in a way, because cards are going to attack the cards opposite them on the board. As long as there's a card opposite them, they're going to attack that card by default. You're not queuing up attacks and choosing what to attack. It's all happening basically geographically depending upon what's across from them. If there are no cards across from them, then they by default get to attack your opponent's base. And that is, of course, how you deal tower damage that wins you the game. So, for instance, here with Sora Lacan, we can see that she'd be really good if your opponent didn't put anything in front of her. She would get to attack your opponent's tower for 8, plus an additional 4 for 12, which would start to shred their defenses incredibly quickly. So this is the sort of thing, the sort of card, it sounds like, that requires a lot of defensive effort to keep from just snowballing and overrunning your lane. Otherwise, Sora Lacan will just crush you very, very quickly. We can take another look at a hero card here. This is Luna. She's a mere 3/6, it seems. Now, that color on her health total might indicate that she's in play and she's taking damage. So again, who knows if these numbers are final. She has a Lucent Beam ability, and it sounds like it has some sort of additive effect to an Eclipse-style card in your hand. So it's hard to tell exactly what all this means. But one thing I didn't focus on, the previous card here that we can take a look at, is you'll see 3 sort of empty slots above Luna there, above her artwork. And that's where you can see where you can equip items, weapons, armor, or some sort of health modifier item. I've seen a picture of a ring in this slot previously, so that might be some sort of accessory as well. And essentially, as these are played onto the card and you buy items from the shop, it sounds like you can assign those items to these hero cards as they're actually in play, and that will give them additional health, additional attacks, all kinds of different modifiers are possible, of course. So not only do you have to choose which lane your hero is going to go in and how they're going to interact with that lane, but also how to buff them to best utilize their ability and their stats in any given lane as well. So as we zoom into a board state here to get a closer look at hero and creep cards in actual play, you can see that the creeps have that sort of neutral gray background and apparently always have 2 attack and 4 health. That looks like a consistent default value. There might be some ways to adjust that, of course, with different heroes or cards. We'll see, but that looks like the standard. And you can see also here that the hero positioning actually matters apparently quite a bit. You can seemingly place your heroes with discretion, which I think will be important about how you place cards, because you'll note a really important UI element on the screen, and that is that there is a little arrow pointing out of the end of cards. And if you look in the 2 middle cards, for instance, the black hero opposing and the creep in the middle on our side of the board, you can see that their arrows are pointing at each other. That means their attack phases, when they resolve, they will hit one another. You can see with the hero card on the right, the red hero card there, that his attack arrow has 2 little diverging arrows out the side. And what that indicates is that also he will attack something diagonally if it's there. So in other words, for any given character to attack the opposing tower, there has to not only be no minions across from them, but also no minions diagonally. So one card could theoretically hold 3 opposing cards in check from attacking a tower, because anything will funnel into essentially diagonal attacks as well. Another thing I think it'd be good to discuss here is that you'll note that hero cards do have distinct colors. We see here a black hero opposing us and a red hero on our side of the board. Now, it sounds like you're going to be able to only include cards of 2 colors in any given deck. Sounds like decks are going to be a minimum of 40 cards, by the way, and those are both hero cards, but also sort of effect or spell style cards that can interact with the board directly. And in a given board, if you play a red hero, you might only be able to play red card effects onto that board. So that's yet another consideration to make with how you have to play your cards and manage your resources of cards in hand. And of course, it sounds like each of these respective colors do have sort of styles of play that they emphasize. I think I saw that red, for instance, was more of a bruiser style of play. When it comes to things like drawing cards, you're going to draw 2 cards each turn. And it sounds like there's no hand size limit, and in fact, there's no board size limit. So in a game like Hearthstone, where you can only hold 10 cards or put 7 creatures onto the board, in Artifact, apparently there's a scroll bar that if you have 25 creatures on the side of the board somehow, seems difficult, but possible, that you could actually just scroll through all of them, and in fact your hand size is unlimited as well. So if you want to play some really stall style game where you just accrue cards and unload a bajillion of them at once, if you could somehow manage to do that, it sounds like it's a possibility. The restrictions for this game seem rather small. It seems like they want to be able to allow you to do as many things as your brain can conjure, which again seems to add to the complexity and depth of the game. When it comes to actually playing cards out in Artifact and the resolution of turns, the way it's going to work is that essentially you just alternate. I play a card, you play a card. I play a card, you play a card. It's not something like Hearthstone where you have a mana pool and you play out your entire turn at once. It's going to be passing back and forth. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to work with time limits. It sounds like that could be something that's rather frustrating or slow to enact if your opponent is stalling you out. But, of course, with every decision, there's a lot to consider. You might need that much time to really make a sound decision, because every time they do something, there are just cascading reactions that are going to be necessary to handle that action. So perhaps that level of depth is necessary to facilitate a sound strategy and actually play a solid game, unlike something that we've seen before. And once both players have either exhausted their mana or apparently passed their turn in some way, because I don't think you have to exhaust your mana, that will end the turn. That lane will resolve itself where the auto attacks automatically happen, and then you move on to the next lane. And as far as initiative is concerned, in other words, whose creature gets to attack first and second, etc., that's still a little bit unclear to me. I haven't seen a lot of details on that just yet, but it sounds like it's just alternating, and at the end of a lane phase, when you move on to the next turn, it sounds like that initiative carries over, so whoever attacked last on the last board, the other person would now get the initiative to play and apparently resolve first as well. So let's talk about the game as a whole, outside of the actual gameplay itself, but moving out to Artifact at a larger level. In other words, what does it cost? When's it coming out? How many cards is it going to include? We know some details there already. First and foremost, the game is not planned to come out just yet. It sounds like mid to late 2018 is the target to get this into players' actual hands. When it comes to pricing, the game is not going to be completely free to play. It's going to have an entry cost of some sort, and there is going to be a marketplace element where you can buy and sell cards. It sounds like there's going to be an ability to buy things like booster packs like we've seen in other card games as well. On top of that, Valve has already indicated that there are going to be some tournaments, including a big tournament with at least a $1 million prize pool, so you can see how this could become pretty predominant esports title very quickly, especially given the amount of depth and skill we're seeing in the game so far. It sounds like it's going to be more esports friendly than something like Hearthstone. Maybe a little less casual friendly, but perhaps the competitive esports stand out in the digital card game space so far. And I think that sums up Artifact so far. Hey again, guys, it's been a while since I've seen you. I didn't get into absolutely everything that was shown. I didn't show all the screenshots. I didn't show all the cards. I might actually do another video to take a more in-depth look at some of the cards and item shop items that were revealed, because I think that's really fun to just talk about what all this stuff looks like and how it might work and how it might interact. Even though we really don't have any idea, I'm just so excited about Artifact and a new card game that I want to talk more about it. But that said, I think this gave you a breakdown of what you can expect from the game. If you haven't been following the news closely, this looks like a fun one. I think it's going to be great, guys. I have a lot of faith. The art style looks fantastic to me, really high quality art. It looks like it has some physicality and reality that so many other card games have lacked. They just like play cards into the ether and it never feels real. It doesn't have good sounds. It doesn't have that Hearthstone production value. But Artifact might be the very first one that does. It seems like that physicality and ability to connect and visualize your cards as real entities is there, and that's so important for making a game fun to watch and fun to play. So, of course, I'll be keeping an eye out on Artifact. As we get more details, more gameplay videos, we'll know a lot more. I am not going to give up Hearthstone for Artifact, in case you're worried. A lot of people seem to be ditching Hearthstone already for Artifact, even though they know very, very little. I might play both games if Artifact ends up being fun and rewarding. Sure, I'll make time for both. But for now, Hearthstone will remain my #1 game. Don't worry, don't freak out. But I hope you've enjoyed this look at Artifact and what it could all be about. And I hope you'll play it alongside me as we learn more. Maybe the beta will come out before too long, and we can jump in there and start learning Artifact together. That'll be a good time. So if you guys have thoughts, comments, questions, fixes to things I said that might not be 100% right, please leave those in the comments below. Of course, we're all learning. As I mentioned, this won't be 100% accurate. We'll learn as we go. So I'd be happy to see corrections, thoughts, first reactions, all of that stuff in the comments below. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, game on.